We have a Republican and a Democrat. And they know what they're talking about. And there'll be time for you to ask questions. So I'm Dorothy Skye, the president of the League of Women Voters of the Northwoods. And I'm going to turn things over to Deb Derschlag, who's the moderator for this evening's program.
Is there a way that volume could be turned up?
The microphone volume is at max.
Oh.
Do you have any assistive listening devices?
No, but I can assist you to a chair up closer.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody who doesn't think they can hear,
You can have my chairs.
then you can have mine too.
I feel I can hear.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, welcome to our May meeting on Wisconsin reapportionment, also known as our legislative maps, or in simpler terms, we can all understand, does your vote count in Wisconsin? Maybe no. So, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and our activities reflect the importance of directing influence on public policy through education and advocacy. Many of you know us as the organization who helps individuals register to vote, but education is a huge part of what we are all about. So our league strives to make each of our monthly meetings educational. The public is always welcome. If you choose to join our league, membership is guilt-free. Be involved as much as you want, and you don't have to do anything but come and learn and listen and support us. So tonight we are very pleased to bring to Rhinelander two former Wisconsin State Senate Majority Leaders, Tim Cullen and Dale Schultz, who have over 50 years of experience in the Wisconsin legislature. They will discuss the current Wisconsin legislative reapportionment plan, league support for prompt reapportionment on the basis of one person, one vote is a long-standing position that was adopted back in the 1930s. So we have policies on that as a league. So Tim Cullen was a Democratic Party member of the Wisconsin Senate representing the 15th district between 2011 and 2015, and previously from 1975 through 1987. He currently lives in Janesville, Wisconsin. Dale Schultz was a Republican politician who represented the 17th district in the Wisconsin Senate from 1991 through 2015. He was previously a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly from 1982 through 1991, and he lives in Richland Center. Together, they will illustrate the legislative partisan gerrymandering that has taken place in Wisconsin as well as in other states, both Republican and Democratic. And they're going to contrast the Wisconsin district reapportionment plan with the Iowa model, which uses a nonpartisan method to determine legislative districts. Cullen and Schultz are honorary co-chairs of the Fair Voting Project, which has the lawsuit before the United States Supreme Court today, and will brief the audience on the current status of the lawsuit. The League of Women Voters, I want you to know, submitted a brief of amicus curiae to the Supreme Court explaining the League's position and interest in the case. So, Senators Schultz and Cullen strongly believe that working together and modeling bipartisan behavior is the best way to begin bridging the animosities surrounding current politics and public behaviors. They have a long history of working together on a number of issues, and reapportionment has been one of them for quite some time. So with that, you guys are mic'd up? Okay, give us a moment, we'll get you, oh, they're gonna use this mic. Very good. All right.
Well, thank you. This is where I usually say, if you like what I have to say, my name is Dale Schultz, otherwise it's Tim Cullen. We're here to have fun. We are firm believers that if you're going to be involved in public discourse and dialogue and attempt to solve problems, you ought to have fun. And I think all of us would agree in the last few years, the fun has gone out of politics. But we're with the League of Women Voters who believe you ought to have fun. Even with serious topics like this. I just want to say that Tim Cullen has been a friend for 30 years. He's been a mentor at various crucial points in my life, like when I became majority leader and had no idea, because there's no handbook for the job, what do? He was right there. Even though I was a Republican, he was a Democrat, he wanted me to succeed. And I just think that that is absolutely terrific. And it's the kind of relationship that we've had throughout the years. When Act 10 happened in the Wisconsin legislature, we found ourselves as centrist, people who just wanted the state to work, sitting next to each other in the state senate and wondering what could we do to make a difference. And as Deb mentioned, setting a good example seemed to us to be the most powerful thing that we could do. And so we've spent a lot of time traveling around Wisconsin talking about redistricting reform, talking about educational financing. I think we've done maybe somewhere approaching 50 of these talks, and we always enjoy the League of Women Voters because you're an outstanding group of citizens. Beautiful day, you're here listening to a couple of politicians. It's amazing, and it says a lot about your citizenship. And I'm here to tell you at the outset, we are winning. We are gaining ground. People are paying attention. And this has, I know, been a long, hard slog for everybody, but we see it all across the nation on a bipartisan basis, from Governor Kasich to Governor Schwarzenegger to certainly a whole host of Democratic politicians. This is absolutely a bipartisan effort. Why is it important? Because I think we all noticed in the last election, the public has gotten sick and tired of politics as usual. They think everybody's a crook, the government doesn't work, and the whole system is rigged. Well, we're here to tell you this is the ultimate rigging of the system, and I'm going to sort of let Tim get started and talk about that, then I'll talk a little while, and then we're going to take your questions. Now, our last event was down at Whitefish Bay for the Milwaukee County League, and we felt very badly because 2/3 of the questions didn't get answered. And so we're going to kind of compress a little bit about what we have to say so that you get a chance to ask questions and dialogue with us. We're not perfect. We have sinned. I certainly have. The truth of the matter is I voted for the plan in Wisconsin. And I'll explain why later when I talk. But it's something that you need to know, and it's fair for you to know. So without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, Tim Cullen, who will sort of get us started.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Dale and I actually like each other. We travel places together. We agree to go in some different direction. We agree to meet at some central point so we can ride half the way there at least. And it wasn't too hard today. We met in the Dells and came up from there. This has been a wonderful friendship. It's been really a lot of fun. And sometimes you say the word fun and people say, well, aren't you serious? Well, we're very serious, but it doesn't hurt to have some fun. So I'm going to mention just a few things about gerrymandering. A lot, I mean, you all know, I just know that instinctively about the league, because we've been to a lot of league forums. You know what gerrymandering is, you know, the rigging of elections through the way they draw the maps. But some things that aren't emphasized enough is that gerrymandering is not a partisan issue. And people go, what are you kidding me? The Democrats are all mad in Wisconsin, the Republicans did it to them. What do you mean it's not partisan? Well, it all depends on which party has all the power. Gerrymandering is about rigging the elections. Why? Because you have the power to do it. And as Lord Acton said a long time ago, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so it's hard sometimes when people first hear that, but then I say, well, you could be in Wisconsin and you'd be very, very upset with the Republicans because they did one of the great gerrymanders of all time in 2011. I can take you on an airplane to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, or Maryland, and I can show you the Democrats gerrymandered significantly those states. Why? Because they had all the power. This doesn't happen when the state government is divided. As long as one party has at least one of the houses or the governorship, gerrymandering won't happen. And I think that's one of the problems that Dale and I had at the beginning of this, was that people weren't upset. The general reaction of the citizens were, when they talked about the reapportionment, and they said it was gerrymandered. They first of all didn't know what the heck gerrymandering was. We should have just called it rigged elections from day one. It would have been more clear. But they just thought, in general reaction was, well, that's what those politicians in Madison do. They draw these maps every 10 years. Well, the reason is because we've never, in all the years that follow the census, you do this the year following the census, going way, way, way back, we've never had one-party government. From 1910 to 1960, they never reapportioned at all. There was no reapportionment. And then in 1963, in the Baker versus Carr case, where they said you had to have one person, one vote, each district had to be about the same number of population, then that forced the Wisconsin legislature to reapportion in 1963 following that case. And we had divided government in 1963. We had a Democratic governor, a Republican legislature. So there was no gerrymander. You go forward, and in 1971, these are the years following the census. In 71, 1981, 1991, and 2001, we had divided government. So there was going to be no gerrymander there. In fact, in most of those, 3 of those 4 times, a federal judge drew the map because the 2 parties couldn't agree. So if anybody here is over about 110 years old, please stand, because you would have to be that old to remember where there might have been a gerrymander following the census. You'd have to go back somewhere before 1910 to do that. So I think that's the first thing I think is worth making a point about, that it is not, it just is not a partisan matter. So you've gone through a lot of these things. Usually I explain to folks more about how gerrymandering occurs and what it is, but it's just using today even the most scientific, advanced ways to be so specifically draw the maps. It's unbelievable. The zigging and zagging that can go on with the data to back up the zigs and the zags. But sometimes people aren't even aware of all of the bad things that happen from gerrymandering. There's the obvious one is that it devalues your vote in these districts, because the November election is decided the day that the map is drawn for the next 10 years. So what it means is that, unlike probably most of the places you work, if you're working, you look so young, I'm sure you're all still working somewhere. But if you're retired, it's where when you did work, how many occasions did you have where you worked that by your own actions, you can guarantee yourself your job for the next 10 years? I don't know of anybody other than that they own the company that could do that. Well, that's exactly what one of the worst parts about gerrymandering, besides the devaluing of people's votes. They can vote for a map that gives themselves a job for the next 10 years. And even if they're charged with a felony, they could probably win. I don't know, 2 felonies might be tougher, but that's how bad it is. But one of the consequences, not only does your vote not matter, it's a 70-30 district, one party or the other. Remember, the minority parties districts, the Democrats in Wisconsin, have even safer districts than the Republicans, because they had to stuff all the Democrats into a minority number of districts to leave enough Republicans to spread across the majority of the districts. So they have a sure thing. Well, if your November election is a sure thing, then what election do you have to worry about? The August primary. And who votes in the August primary? Almost nobody except sort of the true believers, the basis of both political parties. And what does it mean if the only election that matters is August? It means you don't want to have a primary. If your primary goal in life is just to get reelected, you don't want to have a primary. How do you avoid a primary? You stick with the base of your party. You stick with your leadership. You stick with them all the time. This fellow forgot to stick with them all the time. He actually had a mind of his own. It was remarkable. I think he was, by the way, I think of the 4 years I was there, he was the bravest legislator of all 132 of us. For us Democrats to fight and oppose and vote against what we did not agree with Governor Walker was politically easy. It was philosophically easy. It was just easy. It wasn't any fun losing all the time, but it wasn't that difficult of a vote. For Dale to stand up to his leadership on some key issues, not just Act 10, but the mining bill for sure, and some other issues, it took a lot of guts, and he was the one that was willing to do it. Not many more were, that's for sure. So you avoid the primary by just sticking with the team. Just stick with your party, whether you're a Democrat, whether you only safe Democratic seats or safe Republican seats. Just stick with the team and don't be voting with the other party, and don't, by all means, get called a moderate or called someone that compromises. Those are more than 4 letters, but they're tough words. So that's, people say, well, why don't they ever get along down there? There's no political interest in getting along down there. You start voting with the other party, voting against your own party, you're going to get yourself a primary. And you're going to get yourself a primary funded by your own leadership. So sticking with the team is a very, very safe idea if you would just care only about getting reelected. You don't have to listen to editorial opinion. I mean, what the editors say of the newspapers. So what? You've got your base covered, you got them all on email, and you can communicate with them. You don't have to meet with groups that don't agree with you. There's no reason to go meet and listen to somebody yell at you for disagreeing with you on something. Just stay away from them. You don't even have to be in parades if you don't want. I mean, some of them are in parades, I guess, for the exercise, but you don't need to be in a parade to get elected. And so it's on and on. There's just nothing about gerrymandering that improves the process of legislating, of doing what's really best for Wisconsin. So we've been going around for a few years. People more interested as the years have gone on. What Dale mentioned is really true. There's more knowledge about this because partly we've had some elections where people can see actually what happens. When the top of the ticket is just about 50-50, and the legislature is 2/3 one party, that tells you a lot. So now there's this federal lawsuit, and it's Whitford is the name of it. It's named after Bill Whitford, who's one of the plaintiffs from Madison. He's a retired UW professor, actually. And it's we had a 3-judge federal panel, met in Madison. I went to some of the trial, and the chief judge of the 3-judge panel, who was appointed to the federal bench, by the way, by President Ronald Reagan, wrote the decision, and he said the maps they drew and the case was over the state assembly, by the way, although it ends up applying to the state senate, although it does not apply to Congress. He said that that map was unconstitutional. He didn't say it was unfair or whatever, any other word, unconstitutional. Therefore, it begs an obvious question: how can you possibly run another election under an unconstitutional map? And so that court said, by this November 17, this legislature must redraw their map. And that decision has been appealed by the other side, which is the state of Wisconsin, to the Attorney General, to the United States Supreme Court. And the United States Supreme Court has to do something because it's a constitutional question. If it was a legislative question, they could they get hundreds, if not thousands, of cases, and they don't take very many. This one, they have to do something. They have to say something. They can affirm this court or not. I don't know if they'll ever get to a full-fledged hearing where they actually have people testify or not, but oral arguments. But we're pretty optimistic. Justice Kennedy has said on many occasions, Justice Kennedy of the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, has said that he thinks that gerrymandering is bad for democracy. But he also has said, in other cases, he said, don't come to us and cry politics. Don't come up here and say, you got a bad deal and the elections didn't go well. That's not what we are in the business of at the United States Supreme Court. But he said, if you can develop a standard by which we can make a judgment based on a standard, he essentially said he's interested. So our case is written right at Justice Kennedy, because he would be probably the fifth vote, and he might even get the Chief Justice. I'll mention that a little later. But this case is based on the concept of wasted votes, and that is that when you're stuffed into one of these districts at 70-30 one way or the other, your vote is actually wasted. You can skip that race and the results are going to be the same. Results were decided the day the map was drawn. So he uses a big mathematical formula and figures out wasted votes and comes up with this number, which the number is 7, and I will readily admit I can't exactly tell you all the mathematics that go into this thing. But a number 7 means that the map you've drawn is right on the borderline of beginning to be gerrymandered and probably okay. So 6 is even a less gerrymandered map, 5, 4, 3. A perfect map would be a 0. The higher you go above 7, it is gerrymandered. We are 13. We have the privilege of being number 1 in the nation with the highest number. Michigan is not far behind, nor is like I said, Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And Rhode Island, the Democratic gerrymander, is one of the, if you like gerrymanders, you've really got to like Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a Democratic state. It's probably 55, 58% Democratic. It is a Democratic state. Their state assembly is 93% Democratic. So congratulations to the gerrymander lovers. Rhode Island's pretty good. Bad for democracy, but pretty good for gerrymandering. So when will it happen? The court meets until June and it adjourns for July, August, and September. It comes back October 1st. So one of the things we'd love is if they would act on it before they go on summer break. There's rumors that Justice Kennedy wants to retire. We don't want him to retire. And I don't think he wants to retire. I do believe he wants to be involved in this thing. What happens here, you say, well, this court telling this Wisconsin legislature to reapportion is not, people will go, why would they fix it? Well, if they don't fix it, they're at 13 now, say they tweak it a little and send back a map that essentially is a 12 in this formula, this 3-judge panel is not going to accept that. What will probably happen if this legislature won't fix the map, assuming that the Supreme Court doesn't reverse the 3-judge panel, if they don't, I would guess maybe that this court would give it to a federal judge to draw. And a federal judge with a lifetime appointment, I would much prefer the Iowa plan, but a federal judge is a heck of a lot better than today. A federal judge drew the maps in 81, 91, and 01. And we didn't see any intentional partisan drawing when they did it. It wasn't something they even wanted to do, probably. They got it given to them. So if this legislature doesn't get serious and give them a map that's a 7 or less, or 6 or less even, I think the judge, they will probably give it to a federal judge. And there's plenty of time. One of the things that the Republicans did in 2011, which was little noticed, is that historically, they're redrawing the maps after the census. So in 2011, they're redrawing it for the 2012 election, following the 2010 census. Historically, these maps never got finalized until the spring of the election year. Spring of, in this case, would be spring of 2012. One time they didn't get decided until like June, I think of June of 82, was when we finally got the federal maps back. So telling them to redraw a map by November of 2017, even if it drags for 6 months, is still plenty of time. So that can get done. And everything about this, that I think has to be acknowledged up front is you cannot draw 99 competitive assembly seats. I think people realize that. You can't draw a map and downtown Madison creates a competitive district. It's going to be Democratic. You can't draw a map in Waukesha County and some other, many areas of the state. You can't draw a map. I mean, you would actually have to do an incredible gerrymander to create a competitive map. So there are probably as many as 60 assembly seats that you probably can't make competitive if you're going to try to also care about community of interest. But that does mean that there's 35, 40 seats that can be competitive, and that would be the way it used to be. That would be pretty doggone good. And competitive is basically considered, if they're 53-47 for one party or the other, that's pretty competitive. 52-48 is better, and so on. That means the other party has a chance with a better candidate, better organization, et cetera. So we're optimistic. We really are. We really think we're going to win this. It would be terrific if the Supreme Court affirms us in Wisconsin. They will be adopting the standard that is the standard in our lawsuit, the wasted vote standard, which will then be the standard for the nation. And what we've been talking to our lawyers and folks that are working on this thing, and all of our lawyers are doing this pro bono, by the way. It's really terrific. We've raised money for expert witnesses, but the lawyers are working for nothing. But if we can get this done, you know, it's going to be what they think will happen is if the Supreme Court affirms us, they think there's going to be whoosh about 15 states maybe or more, 20 states will be running with a case of the Supreme Court, and it'll be handled very, very quickly. The federal standard will have been set by the court based on the Wisconsin case. So the great thing about this is that we have a terrific chance to get rid of gerrymandering across the nation, not just Wisconsin. So that would be finally a win. They were talking about it. Would be a happy day for democracy, I'll tell you that. So I'll stop there, and maybe some things I know that I haven't covered, believe it or not, all that time. So maybe I'll turn it back over to Dale. How's that? Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing I want to clear up before I get started, just so that you understand. Tim and I were asked, as a result of our work, to adopt an Iowa redistricting model in Wisconsin to be known as the co-chairs of the Fair Wisconsin Voting Project. We are not plaintiffs. So when we say our attorneys, we're buying a little ownership, which we really can't take, and we're certainly not, as you know, the folks that brought the lawsuit, privy to what goes on by lawyers, and you need to understand it. So there's some questions we won't be able to answer for you. But, you know, we do maintain an active interest, and we talk to the PR people and the fundraising people regularly, and in fact, they have been involved in both things. I think you'll see, in short order, probably a national piece. Maybe it'll be in the New York Times or the Washington Post, written by the two of us, arguing our side of the case in the not-too-distant future. And, you know, we expect to be involved right up to the end. But we're not plaintiffs, and that's important. But we've really enjoyed our role in the process. And, you know, I want to just come back to something that we didn't say up front that is so very, very important, and I know everybody in this room believes it. The way our country is supposed to work is you're supposed to pick the politicians, right? Right. They're not supposed to pick you and determine the election. You're supposed to pick those of us who've had the privilege of being in high office, and we serve, you know, at your pleasure. Well, I think all of us know, and we've certainly discovered traveling around Wisconsin, I'm sure it's true in Democratic and Republican gerrymandered states from coast to coast, that there are people who've just quit and given up because they've been told by the people who represent them, you can't touch me, and I don't even have to listen to you. I mean, it's been that blatant at times. People have told us that. Well, that's wrong. No wonder people get angry and did the kinds of things and said the kinds of things they've said in recent elections because they're frustrated. It's not that one political party rigged against the other, I think so much, as they've just discovered that the whole system is rigged against them. And it doesn't matter, because they have these swing elections one way or the other in states, and nothing changes. Well, what has to change is the system have to change. And I think most of us would suggest that big dollars, especially dark money, is a problem. That's not the discussion for today, although we'd be happy to comment on it if anybody wants to bring it or anything else up. But today is about redistricting, and that's a big part of the problem. Now, I mentioned earlier that I had voted for this, and you might probably be wondering, well, Dale, if you're up here now being against this, why weren't you against it then? Because I think redistricting is something that goes on every 10 years, it's pretty normal. Do political parties try to advantage themselves in that process? Yes, historically they've done that. But we have never had the kind of technology and big data that we've had this time around. And when that task was put before us, the leader, Senator Fitzgerald, said, you guys need to trust me. In order to protect our prerogatives and confidentiality with our attorneys, we're going to do this at a law firm. And everybody goes, all right, fine, you know, it's no big deal. And when it came after the work was done, they said, we will bring you over and show you your new district, and you know, you can tell us what you think. So when I was asked to come over to view the work product, I only saw my district, and it really didn't change very much. And quite frankly, given my reputation in the Republican caucus at that time, I was looking in Iowa to see where I was representing. And to my relief, I was still all in Wisconsin. So I really didn't have a big picture. And then, you know, when we did finally bring this to a vote and everybody saw the maps, you know, you didn't really have any way of analyzing it, and the data behind this wasn't really shown us. And so it was after an election that you see this huge swing and you go, wait a minute. Then you start asking questions and you start to realize that the whole science of analytics comes to bear. They're not only in these computer programs putting in party affiliation, voting histories, they're putting in what kind of magazines people buy, you know, how they've answered surveys. And the scary thing about this is they know how you're going to vote before you do, and they will say it to you just like that. It's unbelievable. And that's why they can have these severe swings that you could never face in the past. So it doesn't make me proud to have to explain this, but it's the truth. And if I'm going to stand up here alongside my friend Tim Cullen and suggest we need to change that, then you deserve an explanation of why I did what I did. But you know, the reality is this is more complicated than what we're glossing over today. And I mentioned to you earlier that there are different ways of resolving this. In California, they have a complicated voting scheme that kind of looks like you know, some other states or countries where you all run in the same ballot and the top two people win, and they could wind up with being both of the same party. And you saw recently in Georgia the same phenomena. If you don't win it outright in the first round, something else happens, and that they run off like that. But Iowa had something that we admired, and their system, which was developed with Republican Governor Robert Ray and 2 Republican houses of the legislature, has been in place for 40 years. And what they do is they have their legislative service agency draw the maps. And the only information that they're allowed to use, and this is all done by civil service employees, there's no partisan involvement at all, is the criteria that's laid out in the Civil Rights Voting Act, and the notion of compactness and communities of interest, and pretty standard stuff that enters into the discussion of redistricting. When they draw the map, when they draw the map, this nonpartisan group.
I'll stand here and hold it.
This nonpartisan group goes out around Iowa and they show their work to the public. And the public is allowed to comment on it. And people will say, you've divided our community, this isn't a real community of interest, why don't you change it here or there? The maps have to be drawn without any consideration given to what the former district lines look like, where the legislator lives, that those things can't enter in, and certainly not voting histories. This has been so successful in Iowa, no member of the legislature of either party has ever even introduced a bill to change the system. That's remarkable. And I can tell you why. Because everybody feels it's fair. Now, I'm sure there are some politicians from time to time there who feel a little down about the process because they lost their district, they've been moved into another one. They can still run, but it isn't their district, it's the people's district. And I think, you know, that's an important concept to keep in mind. Tim and I, when we talk frequently, talk about our relationship and how much we enjoy riding in the car together. We don't agree on every subject. The one thing that Tim is most proud of is being an Irishman. The second thing he's most proud of is being a good Democrat. And, you know, I'm a good German, which means there isn't quite as much levity as there is with the Irish. But we could use a little levity once in a while. And I'm a lifelong Republican, and I tell people that I'm from the party of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt, and Ike Eisenhower, and Ronald Reagan, and I'm not sure any of those guys would find themselves comfortable in what the Republican Party has sort of been hijacked into, but that's another night in a case of beer. But you know, we always have the notion that we can learn something from each other, and that's what politics ought to be about. And we have the sense that our job is to represent people. You know, I might be a Republican, but that doesn't give me, I believe, the right to say to Democrats, well, elections have consequences, you lost, get over it. No, I represent all the people. I think partisanship is a lens. It's sort of how you view things. It shouldn't be a straitjacket where all you do is follow the leadership, because then who are you really representing? You represent the party, not the people. And I found over my course of the years in the legislature a simple truth, and that is Republicans from suburban areas on the eastern side of the state really don't have much in common sometimes with Republicans in the rural areas in the west or the north. In fact, we may have more in common with inner city Democrats. And so why should we be prevented from getting together and passing public policy that is good for the people we represent? And when you have a hammer and an anvil created by large amounts of money and a redistricting system that beats people in the line, that can't be good for democracy. And I would submit that what you've seen in recent years of people getting angrier and angrier is the result of a system that people don't think serves them any longer. So I think that's our challenge, and I think that's what makes this group so special, because you have dedicated yourselves over the years as Republicans, Democrats, and Independents to fulfilling that great mission for, as Ronald Reagan used to say, that city on a hill, this exceptional democracy, where we can have dialogue and civil discourse, and we can work together to make this a better country or state. And you know, Vince Lombardi said something about working together and being successful, and as Wisconsinites, that resonates with us. And I am equally hopeful as Tim is, but we're going to need a strong push in the next few weeks and maybe the next few months to make sure that we make enough noise that the Supreme Court continues the excellent work we've seen to date. We have never gotten anywhere near this far before in reapportionment anywhere in the country, and we did it with one Democratic judge and 2 Republican judges. So this hasn't been a partisan case where people worried about packing of the courts. We've had a bipartisan judiciary appointment group helping lead the way. We just need to convince some folks in Washington, D.C. who wear black robes to work every day that there's something important here, and something needs to change. So we want to thank you for being here, and I guess with that we're going to stop. Now, does everybody been given a card or a pen? I don't know what you did here. You're just going to raise hands? Okay. Got somebody in the back? You want to stand up and say your name and...
Yes, sir. Richard Gazelle. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Why would any party in power, whether it's the Republicans in Wisconsin or the Democrats in Rhode Island, some of whom might be there by virtue of gerrymandering, why would any party in power voluntarily adopt something like the Iowa system? Or are you saying, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, are you saying probably they won't, and so are you saying that we, for the foreseeable future, are constantly going to be going to court?
Well, I know what human nature is, and I sense there's a certain amount of that, but let me just say that once there was a place called Iowa, and they did it. They did the right thing. And more recently, in California, on a bipartisan basis, they did the right thing. Iowa isn't the only model, but it can happen. And you can appeal to idealism of people out there. But politics, as we know, tends to be a little cynical, and I agree with you. And yes, we may wind up going to the courts, but that's their job in a democracy. And we need to respect that. And I'm hopeful that the courts here are going to recognize that the Republic is in danger and will step forward and give us a standard that both political parties are treated fairly under and can take heart in their ideas winning elections rather than their mechanics.
Well, I think you answered your own question correctly. But what the history of Wisconsin is that we will eventually get back to it, minimum split government. After all statewide races, there's no gerrymander in a statewide race, so we have a governor's race next year. A Democrat could win that. That would be so there would be, even as Republicans kept control of at least one house, in 2021 we'd have divided government, but we wouldn't have a gerrymander possible. And maybe in that environment, I mean, who'd have thought 18 months ago that our president would be Donald Trump? So I'm not saying that any commentary on him, I'm just saying, how can we know what politics are going to be like, and let alone in 18 months, but in 2 or 3 years. So I think in that environment, it's very possible, I don't know, it's very possible, it's possible that both parties say, look, we're going to turn this over to a federal judge, or we're going to go do what Iowa does. And I think that creates a possibility. The other thing I need to add is that for people who are Democrats, who think if we win this case, the Democrats are going to take over one or both houses of the legislature, that's not what's likely to happen at all. There are 65 incumbent Republicans and 34 incumbent Democrats in the state legislature, state assembly today. What would probably happen is the Democrats would pick up some seats, but there's no reason any expectation that boom, you do this and the Democrats take over. What it does mean is that there'll be a whole lot more elections that are competitive. That's really what will happen. And if the Democrats have better ideas over time, they'll succeed and get into the majority. And the state Senate will likely follow it. So that's one of the things. I know there's some people on the Democratic side who would go, if we could just win this case, we're going to take over. And that's simply not likely to happen. There's just that, because the Republicans have so many more incumbents running in the fairer maps. But I'm thinking that maybe divided government forces the decision to pick Iowa, and so it's a ways away. Yes?
Hi, my name's Kathy Sperry, and I've been following the gerrymander issue for just about 6 months now. And I understand that they have put Senate bills and Assembly bills before the legislature over the last 2 years, which failed, obviously, also based on the Iowa model, and that the current Senate bills are Senate Bill 13 and Assembly Bill 44. When does the legislature actually review those bills and take action on them?
The legislature only reviews those bills if the majority party, the chairman of the committee that they're referred to, wants to review them. As we found out when we introduced the Iowa plan, the chairman just refused to have public hearings on it. So the process of passing a bill begins with a public.
So what you're saying is it has never been put before a vote?
No, not even close.
So unless the courts do act, unless the Supreme will never see redistricting.
Yes, but we will see elections, and all we have to do is to have split government, and gerrymandering goes away. So there is that solution out there, even if we lost the federal lawsuit, that there is going to be an election next year, and a statewide election, and that could fix. That would be the end of gerrymandering, and it wouldn't be done in 2021. But if we lose the case, and the Republican Party wins the governorship next year, we could well have gerrymandering until 2031. So the stakes are high with the case, and the case fixes a lot, but elections still matter.
My name is Pam Kabilas from Merrill, Wisconsin. Given that Scott Fitzgerald and Robin Voss spent $2.1 million drafting of our taxpayer money, drafting the gerrymandering bills in secrecy, and after they had drafted this and it passed, the judges forced them to release the information to the other party, the Democrats. At which time, the Republican Party, I don't know if it was Robin Voss or Scott Fitzgerald, said, oops, the computers that this information was on, they got wiped clean. One of our hard drives is damaged. And that some unknown staffer was responsible.
Always those darn staffers, you know.
What concerns me is that the effort is a wonderful effort. I appreciate your lawsuit. I appreciate that attorneys are taking this pro bono. But what we're looking at right now, on the other side, is the knowledge that just came out that Michael Greeby and the Bradley Foundation, with deep pockets of $800+ million, want this model, the Wisconsin governing model, to be the standard nationwide. So I'm concerned that that deep money is what you're up against and what the pro bono attorneys are up against. What can we do to help your cause, which is our cause?
Well, first of all, if you didn't see it, if you Google the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel last Sunday, the headline story on the front page is about just what you were referring to. And the Bradley Foundation only has $800-some million. They are not in the Koch brothers league. I mean, so you think about it, there's levels here. There's billions out there, then there's people with only $800-some million. Now they want they want everything that's been done in Wisconsin in the last 7 years to be the standard for the nation. There's no question about it. All you can really do is do what you're doing. I think it starts with just joining something. Join the League of Women Voters. Join whatever local group. There's lots of groups that are springing up around Wisconsin. Not so much just on related to the parties, but a lot of cases the issues, environmental issues or whatever they might be. And you're already here because you've joined something. But is to tell everybody you know, who's the first person that says, boy, I really don't like what's going on in Madison or Washington or whatever, ask them what they've joined in the last year and encourage them to do it. I just really think there's still something to be said for people power. But this money thing, and the scary thing about it is, the only dark money, the only money from the Bradley Foundation, from Americans for Prosperity, which is the Koch brothers, the only money that you and I ever see is the money they spend on radio and TV, because the radio and TV stations have to disclose who buys the time. Way more than that is the money they spend on all this identifying voters and infrastructure and all this kind of stuff. I was in La Crosse talking about this 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. And I'm driving down the street and I see a storefront in April of 2017, 18 months before an election, and it says Americans for Prosperity. The Koch brothers, that's a year-round, full-time office in La Crosse, staffed, and they have somewhere between 9 and 11 of those in Wisconsin. All that office costs, staff costs, investigation costs, everything that they're doing in those offices, we never see that money. We never see a dime of that. We just see the radio, TV. So there is a huge fight going on here where one side really has a huge dollar advantage. And the only answer really is that more people have to get off their duff and get involved and care like they've never had to care before. We didn't have to worry about these things before. It was, just quickly, there was a time in Wisconsin when the majority leader of the Assembly and the majority leader of the Senate of different parties had dinner together every week, once a week. I mean, you think that in today's world, it's just like it's impossible to believe. But you asked the right question. I don't have the perfect answer.
Well, let me just briefly say, we could all get in a fetal position and underneath our chairs and, weather the storm, I guess, maybe. But it wouldn't do anything. I had the privilege of serving in the Wisconsin legislature for 32 years. And I cherished every moment of that, and, alongside being able to farm and do some real estate work. It was good for my family. I think it was good for my community. I was one of the top vote getters over the years, and I always told people I represent everybody after election, including my opponent. And I was always proud of the fact that we could be friends afterwards, even after a tough election. What can we do? Well, I would submit that when faced with a really large problem, you break it into pieces and make it manageable. Redistricting is a manageable thing. Now, it's taken a lot longer than I would have liked, frankly, but together we have made extraordinary progress. Not just the people in this room, not just the League of Women Voters, but concerned citizens on both sides of the aisle. When we had the initial kickoff press conference in Madison, we had a former lieutenant governor candidate who had been a Republican legislator from the Fox Valley standing there. We had Lee Dreyfus's chief of staff. We had a former state senator from north of here, Dan Thino. I was there, and we had a number of Democrat legislators there as well. And we could agree on that this wasn't right, and we were going to change it. And we've worked as hard as we can, and given the support that we've seen from all across the state from people like you, we've done what people said couldn't be done. I believe that we can get this done. I'm not going to stop after this. I've been involved in politics for over 50 years. I started out as a child, and I hope to do it as long as I'm taking a breath on this planet, be involved as a citizen, the most important job of all, on issues of public policy. I told you earlier, I just alluded to it, when this is over, I want to get involved in the move to amend to do something about the massive amounts of money that are poured into an election, because it is just obscene. Yes. As a Republican, I suspect that most of you would not be surprised when I told you I'm kind of pro-business. I mean, I really believe in free enterprise. I always thought that business ought to be represented in the public square when we discuss the important issues that confront us as a society. But I never once suggested that business should own the public square. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think we need to have an honest discussion as citizens who can dialogue in a civil manner from different political perspectives to confront this and to deal with this and not allow people to drive us apart into separate tribes. So I appreciate the frustration, and believe me, we've spent a lot of time in the car talking about this with each other and with groups all around the state. But I am more optimistic than ever, and with a crowd like this, I know we're in good shape here. I think the woman way in the back was up real early, and Yes.
Dorothy Scott, what are the strengths of the plaintiff's argument in Whitford v. Gill? And what parts of the Constitution will the Supreme Court use to judge that case?
Well, as a lawyer, I'm going to let Tim go first.
As a non-lawyer, I know there's two different amendments that apply. I can't give you a number. But the basic case is that you cannot draw a map that diminishes the value of a person's vote. That's the core of the case. And this map in Wisconsin diminishes the value of an enormous, way more people are disenfranchised in the Assembly and State Senate elections. That's what it amounts to, because of this map. And that's the core of the case. I wish I knew, it's two amendments, it's not the second, but it's two amendments to the Constitution. It seemed like one was the 14th, but there's two of them that they're tied to. Maybe people here know more than I do about that. That's why I'm glad we have lawyers representing us. And we have some really top flight ones. In fact, they went now and got another lawyer who's practiced in front of the U.S. Supreme Court many times to help us with the case. So we're not going to have a rookie up there if they ever want to talk to the lawyers.
Does everybody here understand the notion of packing and cracking? Is there anybody who doesn't? Okay, well, good. I'm glad you're brave enough to, at least for everybody else's benefit, put your hand up. What we're talking about when we say every vote is equally weighted, what the courts have said is you can't draw a map, or the principle is you can't draw a map that so packs people into a district of one party or cracks a natural community in order to drive the strength of that community and thereby diminish votes. What the formula that Tim mentioned earlier does is measure that. And that's the standard that Justice Kennedy said. He said, gerrymandering is bad, but I need a standard. That's the way the court operates. So that's what's so unique about this. And we've seen a series of court cases dealing with legislative reapportionment that in recent years has been kind of exciting. In Arizona and California, where they have the initiative process, the legislature wanted to stand up and say, oh, no, you can't be involved, that's strictly our prerogative. And the court said, no. The sovereignty of the people trumps the legislative prerogative. So I think the courts have been warming up and getting a little bit more friendly. We just need them to adopt this standard and to recognize that we now have a standard that measures the amount of disenfranchisement by devaluing votes that occurs with packing and cracking. Does that make sense? If you think about it, it'll get you there. And I think what it boils down to, and as Tim said, we probably would have been better off talking about, is just it rigs the outcome of the election, because the only thing that matters is the primary. So the only thing any sitting legislator has to worry about is not getting a primary for themselves. Okay.
Okay. Is there any kind of action that will follow after gerrymandering that will get rid of Citizens United?
Well, there's already a group out there called Move to Amend that's got a very active group of people, and they've been going municipality by municipality, and I believe, did the Lincoln County Board even adopt a resolution up here?
18-4.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are people out here who are working on an educational process. It's not partisan. That people just say, this system isn't working for us anymore, and we're going to speak up. And, I think their theory is to get as many local units of government to get on board, that pretty soon a movement just sort of arises. But they do similar things on a regular basis. Believe me, there have been many nights and we're talking and people would say, hey, wait a minute, I came here to talk about Move to Amend. What are you guys doing here? So we just learned to talk about it. But yes, that's going on. Those are people who decided that was going to be their issue and they were going to drive the bus on it. And they're doing a good job. I think that, every election there are more and more communities. And if they get enough of them, eventually, smarter than average politicians are going to put their finger in the air and figure out which way the wind's blowing and get in front of the parade. It's kind of how it always works in this political process.
Yes.
I'd like to follow up on the last two questions over here.
I hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'd like to follow up on two of the questions that were just asked, and I have my own questions, so I'm just gonna pack it in real quick.
We can restate it too if you don't hear it.
Okay. One is that someone back here asked what the opposing argument is, and I'd really like to hear, like, what are they basing, justifying to the Supreme Court, okay? And the other part of that kind of goes with that, I think you were saying, about how there's the people with all the money wanted to support the Wisconsin model? I just don't see where there's any model besides, I get as much as, you know, the party in power gets everything. I mean, is there any scientific basis to theirs? My very last thing is, so what can an individual do now as far as who do we communicate with, who do we let, or is there any place to go? I can't write the Supreme Court. You know, where do I express?
Well, you write a letter to the editor. I mean, the Supreme Court's probably not going to see it. I mean, I understand that.
That's right, but where does that go? Just to let the public,
All this
public know?
citizen uprising will only matter when you have a competitive district. And the candidates have to worry about what everybody thinks instead of just their base. So that's the key to it. But this whole Wisconsin thing, what we were talking about with the Bradley Foundation, what they call it, Wisconsin plan or whatever they call it.
As a model.
The Wisconsin model. I mean, it's so many of the things that have been done in the last 7 years. It's not just gerrymandering. It's destroying public unions. It's turning private union and non-union workers against public employees. It's destroying the environmental protections that we lost in the iron ore mining bill that passed that Dale had the courage to vote against, along with all Democrats, and Dale in the Senate voted against it. They lost 17-16. It's all the things they've gone after. The Government Accountability Board. Any progressive idea that's been knocked out in the last 7 years, that's what amounts to the Wisconsin plan. Therefore, let's go knock them out in some other states as well. That's essentially what the Bradley Foundation is doing. Now, did you have, was there a first question that I missed?
Yes, there was about, at the Supreme Court, if the other sides.
What are they
What's
arguing?
the
Okay, yeah, it's great. When I was in lacrosse, I was opposing gerrymandering, and they got the chairman of the Lacrosse County Republican Party to be in favor. Now, he wasn't in favor of gerrymandering. He was in favor of letting the legislature draw the map, was what he said. He didn't say bluntly, "We won, that's tough." The argument they're trying to make is that this is not gerrymandering. This is a result of where Democrats and Republicans happen to live. That's their argument, is that it's not the Republicans' fault that Democrats, more and more in the last, people who vote consistently Democratic, live in smaller pockets of the state. They live in mostly urban areas and a few rural areas. But the vast majority of Democratic votes coming from Milwaukee County and Dane County and La Crosse County and Rock County and Ashland, Bayfield, and Douglas counties and a few other. And that it's not the Republicans' fault. The Republican, in some kind of slight majorities, span a whole lot of the rest of the geography. Well, it is true that there is a lot of that heavy Democratic voting in certain urban areas, but this didn't start a year ago. This has been going on for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and we had fair maps through all those years. So it's a bogus argument, but that's the best one they come up with. The one they love is "We won, tough luck." That's their favorite one. But when this guy was defending it in lacrosse, what he did was he jumped from gerrymandering to the jobs that have been created in the last 7 years, and it just went on and on. We've had tax cuts like never before. He stopped talking about gerrymandering because there wasn't much really to say.
I think the other thing that has to be emphasized is traditionally people who don't want the courts involved and want this to be a legislative prerogative, they say, well, it's constitutionally our responsibility and we're doing what we have a right to do, and if they'd won the election, put up better candidates, had better issues, they'd be doing the same thing to us. Well, there's some truth to that, and in democratic states, you know, that happens. On the other hand, you know, the sophistication is gotten to the point where this unbelievable advantage is built in, and the courts have started to recognize that. But that's the thrust of it. What can we do? Well, you know what it takes to get things viral. You know, the internet is a wonderful tool. I mean, it has enormous power, sometimes kind of misused with fake news, but there's no reason why it can't be used to educate people, to get groups of people. You know, one of the problems we face with this is, as Tim said earlier, redistricting is something that Republicans and Democrats do to each other. It really doesn't affect me. Well, it does. In an indirect way, it controls everything. So it doesn't matter whether your issue is health care or the environment or workers' rights or, you know, what kind of a pro-business, you know, atmosphere you want in the state. All of those things are rigged, and the outcome is determined based on redistricting. But you have to take a little time to explain that to people. And then you've got to encourage them to make their voices heard. You know, one of the most interesting things to me since the election, you know, I've just watched this as a Republican, is this giant resistance movement that's just blossomed everywhere around different issues in the country. Now, I know some of my Republican colleagues choose to say, well, these are all bust-in people from some mythical land. Yeah. But I don't honestly believe that. I think what's happening are issues are mattering to people and they're speaking up. I think the same thing actually happened with the Tea Party. And, you know, politics can be a rough sport and it can get people's passions up, and I think we're seeing that now. I think we're going to continue to see that. This is something that we know affects everybody we know who cares about some aspect of government. And we've got to show them, you know, why it's important and then encourage them to make their voice heard. You know, workers' compensation, unemployment compensation. These are all things that have been changed in this state and that are only being done because of redistricting has made this state artificially way more right-wing than it ever was in the past. I mean, if you, here I have to make a shameless plug for his book. In the back here is a book called A Ringside Seat that my friend Tim Cullen literally wrote. I think it's remarkable. I was privileged to have the opportunity with several other people to read the chapters as he did them and to sort of, I wouldn't call fact check, but make certain that he gave all the sides and explained things adequately. It's remarkable. Now, he doesn't make a dime off any of these. What the proceeds of the book are for is for a scholarship in the Janesville School District for students of color to get a degree in education and come back. If they agree to teach in Janesville, they can be eligible for this scholarship, which is $5,000 a year for 5 years. So it's almost a free ride. It's been funded by him directly through fundraising events, and this is just one element he uses for political trade. So, you know, the books are back there. If there's too much of a stampede, he'll take your name and mail you one, I'm sure, if you pay for it in advance. He'll probably be willing to sign them for you. But it's a great read. He's the one that did all the work. But at any rate, I just wanted to mention that. And you know, together we can do this. But we have to take the time to educate people and explain to folks how things are changing. And this concept of a Wisconsin model is a good one. I mean, people go, well, what is that? Well, what they're talking about are all these changes that occurred in Wisconsin. Getting rid of it, and defunding our state parks, defunding the university, giving more tax cuts back to people. you know, there's people that this appeals to, but it has unmistakably changed the face of Wisconsin and created a lot of unrest. But, you know, the people at the Bradley Foundation and other folks feel strongly about what they're doing. And as long as they work harder than the other side, they're likely going to prevail. But that's the model they're talking about. Way in the back with the sunglasses. I know when you're cool, the sun shines all the time.
From a League of Women Voters point of view, I think another thing that everyone in this room can pay attention to is Act 23, which pretty much changed residency requirements, changed access to the polls in Wisconsin. And the League of Women Voters has been working on all of those issues and will continue to work on those issues in terms of taking back our vote, even if we are gerrymandered, because it's one thing to be gerrymandered and it's another thing not to be able to get to the polls at all, because you can't produce the right identification or whatever it is. So could you speak to that at all, or do you feel comfortable speaking to that?
By the way, there's a chapter on gerrymandering, almost all of a chapter, and the rest of it's on the destruction of the GAB, and I think Act 23, I think it's the voter ID law. I always know them by the common name or their bill number. I never keep track of what it is. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing that they could never have passed that in a bipartisan legislature, or even one that wasn't gerrymandered. You can't jam that through. Everybody, what they were brilliant at it was the focus was all on the ID. You got to have an ID, and everybody goes. They said, well, you got to have an ID to get a library book. What's wrong with having it? And a lot of people went. Heck, I was like 70% of the people in the polls said, yeah, that makes sense. What the heck, you got to have an ID? Well, that really wasn't what it was all about. What the reality is the ID law did not affect probably 80% of Wisconsin. If you have a driver's license or passport or whatever, there are a whole bunch of things that qualify. It affected people and groups of people who tended, not always, who tended to vote Democratic. It was just the bluntest thing that was done. The same detailed information that they had on the gerrymander, they had in that bill. They knew which groups of people would more likely vote Democratic, not all the time. They shortened the time frames when you could vote, the absentee voting. They used to be able to vote up until, at the voting place, you could vote until the day before the election. They moved that back to the previous Friday. And on and on, they jerked the college kids around, something awful. The ID card was okay if it had a picture, but if it didn't, they were okay at the universities, but not the tech colleges, or vice versa. I forget how they jerked everybody around. My mother-in-law, who's 93, who is a hardcore Republican, by the way, and I've been married to her daughter for 33 years, and I've had no impact on her whatsoever, although she says nice things about me, so it's a start. She worked at the polls for 40 years in Janesville at the same polling place, but she no longer drives a car. She's 93 now. She couldn't drive a car anymore. Had given up her car. Didn't worry about her driver's license because she wasn't ever going to drive again. She was born in a township in North Dakota in 1923. And even though she could walk into that polling place and the workers knew that she was Kay Mork, she would have had to somehow, and my wife, her daughter, could help with it. Not everybody has somebody who can help with. You would have had to get a hold of North Dakota and get a copy of her birth certificate back here so she could go to then she could go to the DOT office if there was one nearby. There is one nearby in Janesville, and get this special card. All to walk into a place where everybody there knew her for 40 years.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
And she happened to have a daughter who could do all this stuff for her. I mean, it was on and on. And it was just one of the worst things I saw. And all this stuff that made it difficult to vote was sort of camouflaged below the fight over ID, and just the general fight. It wasn't ever about what does it really mean to a certain kind of person who lives a certain kind of life in a certain kind of place, whatever. Really pretty bad stuff. But to his credit, your chief of staff went public, who was in the room then, and said that they were giddy about passing this bill because they knew what it meant in addition to gerrymandering. So, yes.
I heard something about, well, whoever works harder. I think that this should be, I'm Pollyanna. I think it should be based on what's right. The right thing to do, and the numbers of legislatures who don't do the moral thing or the right thing with their vote, it affects so many people and it's just wrong. It shouldn't have anything to do with who's got the most money or the most work.
Of course, our history
Huh?
the whole course of our history is providing more people access to the polls. I mean, those great founding fathers of ours, after all, George Washington was elected in 1788, and no woman could vote for George Washington, no African American could vote for George Washington, no renter could vote for George Washington, and if you didn't belong to the proper church in your community, you couldn't vote, which is a little bit of a shot at us Catholics, but what the heck are you going to do? Sometimes we got some shots coming. And so we've come all the way, all those categories of people can vote. And there is this mentality, though, that you should only be able to vote if you're, quote unquote, informed on the issues, or that, whatever. There's an elitism. There's an elitism about how that bill was passed, that these poor folks who don't have a car and can't get to the polls, well, maybe they're not informed. I mean, there's all that kind of stuff that was going on, and it hurt. But I would say the league and some other groups really went to bat to try to find the people who needed the help to vote, and there was an enormous amount done. And it turned out there was, if there's damage to one person, there's no reason to pass that law. But the number of people who were damaged by it was greatly lessened by the efforts that people made. Yes?
This is off on another topic, but that articles that I've been reading talking about the Koch brothers are behind rounding up 2 more states to have a constitutional convention. What's behind all that? I mean, what part of the Constitution or parts do they want to rewrite? Or if it's this wide open constitutional convention?
I can't speak for the Koch brothers at all. I honestly have not spent, I'll acknowledge, I have not spent time paying attention to that because I just had this hope that it was ludicrous, but I maybe shouldn't have that hope.
Yeah.
Wide open.
This is something that seems to come up about every 10 years. Somebody feels very strongly about this. I have no knowledge as well about how the Koch brothers believe on it, but I suspect there's lots on the internet. Maybe you've been reading some of it.
I just saw a couple of lines saying, only 2 states away, and and I just thought, what is it?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. Well, the danger is that people who are in favor of this say, well, we can narrowly define what we want to change. But my understanding is that's not how the process works, that once you go to a constitutional convention, anything is permissible. So the last time this was shut down, it was the right that said, oh, no, because you could have a constitutional convention, and who knows, the socialists could be persuasive. You could have an alliance between environmentalists and Tea Party types like they had in Georgia over solar power, and they could decide to get rid of the fossil fuel industry, and so people go, well, wait a minute, maybe this wouldn't be in our advantage. But, it could happen, and, that's why citizenship and involvement is so very important. It's why we need to dialogue and discuss issues and learn from one another. Yes?
I don't like to speak in public, I'm sorry, but, I guess I am still, as a citizen, wondering, what I can do while the case about gerrymandering is in the courts, and I guess my question is, in addition to the arguments made in court, to the Supreme Court, is the Supreme Court affected by changes in society? And I ask that because I sort of feel like that happened with marriage equality. Suddenly, you know, people were really rising up about that. So, you know, can people taking action through rallies and marching affect, and speaking out, of course, but that kind of thing, in addition to speaking to our neighbors and learning everything we can learn, can we have an effect on the Supreme Court regarding gerrymandering in that way, through resistance, through showing that society is changing about this issue?
Well, as mentioned earlier, neither one of us is an attorney, and I am certainly not a court watcher, but I'll attempt to answer your question. I would say the answer is yes. I think these are human beings who are cognizant of their legacy, just like presidents tend to be, or certain politicians in high office. They worry about their legacy. If I had voted in favor of Citizens United, thinking, you know, that there was something about free speech in there, and I'd seen the results, I'd be sickened. I suspect there are some people who voted for that who were sickened, who are sitting there thinking, this is going to be my legacy, and then it'll make me feel good, and maybe they'll want to be on the right side of something. I mean, I believe that. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But I believe that, yes, that as human beings, they're influenced by what's going on in society. I believe that the spontaneous eruption across the country about the Muslim ban, the president's words, not mine, affected, you know, the courts, and they said, no, this isn't right, and we're not going to go there, and we're not going to go there because you've told us in your own words what the intent was. So yeah, I think the courts are impacted. So, you know, I suspect that more than half of you are on Facebook. You know, you might want to mention that in a non-threatening way that people should look at it. You're all capable of emailing a letter into your local newspaper or into a newspaper in Green Bay or Eau Claire. I don't know whether the courts accept correspondence, but I'd send it there. I'd send it to legislators and tell them you're watching. I mean, I would go everywhere. I'd try to get your town board to you know, pass the resolutions. People say, well, we're not political, we don't want to be involved, and that may be true. But I'm telling you that on these issues, increasingly across the state, governments are stepping up and they're saying, wait a minute, this is a process that belongs to all of us and it has to work. And at least locally, we may not agree on this, this, and this, but we agree that the process is important for us getting along as citizens. So whatever you can dream up, I would do it. And don't worry about it somebody else. Break the problem down, focus on one issue, and pour everything you got into it.
I think the answer is absolutely yes, absolutely. Dale alluded to it, but the Chief Justice was for Citizens United. I absolutely believe, I've known a few judges that have some instinct about this. They do care about their legacy. And he's the guy that opened the door on money. But now you come to him with a case which says, now you're taking away the value of somebody's vote. Especially if we get Kennedy. I think if we get Kennedy, we get the Chief Justice. I think we win 6-3. Because then he can say, you're not devaluing somebody's vote. And the court does move. I think marriage equality in my lifetime and what I've studied in history, that issue moved faster than any social issue I've ever seen. I mean, women's right to vote is 1848, and they finally get it in 1920. Marriage equality was blown out of the water in a referendum here in 2006, I think it was. So that one moved. I doubt very much if that court would have made that decision in 2006 or 2004. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, was a 9-0 decision. I doubt if all those 9 would have voted for Brown versus Board of Education, that segregation was separate and unequal. 20 years before that, I don't think they would have. Baker versus Carr in '63, they saw these states weren't reapportioning at all, like Wisconsin for 50 years. And they said, no, that's not right. That's not one person, one vote. They would have said one man, one vote then. Because you think in 50 years, if you don't reapportion Wisconsin from 1910 to 1960, all the urbanization that occurred with 2 world wars and a depression. So the rural areas were way overrepresented, and the urban areas were way underrepresented. They had tons of people in an urban district and only one legislator versus the rural areas. I have no doubt. That's why Dale and our column, which is we are not trying to get our column in any Wisconsin newspaper or Nebraska newspaper. We're trying to get it in the newspapers that we believe the Supreme Court or their staff read. That's why we're trying to get it in the Washington Post and the New York Times. Because I do believe some justice, somebody said long ago something about the court reads the paper. Somebody said something like that. I don't know who it was, but I absolutely believe they do. I knew a judge one time. I said, how do you make your decisions? He said, I make them on the merits, and the ties go to my friends. I don't know. Now, only the judge decides when it's a tie, right? I don't mean that in any way to diminish the quality of justice we've had. We've had a lot of great ones, but I believe it does matter. That's why we're trying to. This case is now almost being fought more in the East Coast than it is in Wisconsin for that very reason. Yes. Do you have a question? Yeah. You the first time.
My name is Stephen Schreier. Knowing that gerrymandering is an intentional deprivation of someone's constitutional rights to be represented equally and fairly, why, if the Supreme Court decides that that's exactly what transpired, that individuals knowingly took that away from the citizens that they were meant to represent, why could those people then, if it's decided that that's what happened, not enter into a class action suit and sue the individuals who specifically were responsible for this? Because to me, go after their money. That is what impacts the people who do this crap the most. Take their money.
Well, anybody can bring a lawsuit. I guess the only real answer I have to that could happen. I don't know. That hasn't actually crossed my mind. I'm just trying to win this thing.
I'll join you, Robin Boss.
Yeah.
I wanted to amplify, if I could, the point this woman made earlier. You know, the idea that it is very discouraging that we can't rely upon our elected officials to do the principled and constitutional thing. They take an oath to uphold and protect and defend the Constitution, and then they clearly violate it, and I think they do have to be held accountable for that, or at least confronted with it. The question I have is, if the Supreme Court adopts a measurable standard, then for disenfranchisement, wouldn't that also apply then to congressional and federal elections? It would be a pretty easy leap.
Well, my understanding, again, I want to re-emphasize, I'm not even allowed to play an attorney on TV. But my understanding, for what it's worth, is, as Tim said, there would be a flood of lawsuits from all over the country on this exact same issue and on variations, and it wouldn't be hard for me to imagine, yes, somebody suggesting this ought to apply to congressional seats. What do we have now? 98 or 99% of Congress incumbents get reelected when, you know, we're not electing anybody anymore. No wonder people get discouraged. So yeah, I could see that happening, but where we're at right now, given the parameters of this lawsuit, you know, we can't, you know, opine what future judges would do, but that's kind of how the law tends to change through the courts. There'd be more lawsuits.
By the way, one thing
well, to give somebody who hasn't had a chance to.
You just mentioned congressional. There's a very different thing going on in Wisconsin on congressional reapportionment. It's been going on, at least I know personally know, since at least the 70s. And that is congressional reapportionment in Wisconsin is about protecting incumbents regardless of party. Since at least 1970s, the lead Democratic, the senior Democratic congressman from Wisconsin and the senior Republican congressman from Wisconsin draw the congressional maps in Washington and come out here and lobby the two parties to pass them the way they are. And it's about incumbency, not party. Now, why they do that, it's historic, but it may be that out of 435, maybe our 8 don't matter that much. I don't know. But I was going, after I saw the 2011 maps, they did one gerrymander to take care of Democrat Ron Kine from the La Crosse area and Sean Duffy, the new guy from up here. I don't know if does he represent you folks? Or, I didn't know where the line was. He's elected from, but Kine's district was basically the Mississippi River district. Kind of ran right from Eau Claire all the way to, he ran in it once in 2004.
I came in second.
He came in second too. But he also had some reasonably close races. You know, incumbent congressmen don't think they should actually have close races. That's beneath them. And Duffy did not have a sure district. He had Dave Obie's old district. So what they did was they took a narrow strip of land. Remember, Kine is basically the Mississippi River, not that wide and real long and narrow. They took a narrow strip of land from La Crosse and ran it right into the middle of the state, all the way to Portage County or Stevens Point. And they gave Kine narrow strip of land he didn't want because it went through some Republican, but it was it could be a township, you know. And so he gets Portage County and Stevens Point, heavily Democratic, significantly Democratic area, and Duffy gets rid of Portage County. And then Kine had a couple counties north of Eau Claire that he didn't really like that well. St. Croix was one of them. So Duffy has to have some more people because he just gave up Portage County, so he gets those Republican counties. And there was the same thing done down in my area for Tammy Baldwin and Paul Ryan when Tammy was in Congress. Won't go through the details, but it was pretty bad. So when I was going around a year ago, I was saying, you know, the congressional seats are so gerrymandered for the incumbent that I would predict to you that in 2016, none of those races will be decided by less than 14 points. I went around saying that. Well, I was wrong. None of them were decided by less than 20 points. All 8 of them, including a new guy in Green Bay, a brand new person in an open seat. None of them won by less than 20 points. And none of them are going to lose by less than 20 points next year either. It's a different, it's an incumbent gerrymander as opposed to a partisan gerrymander. And it's not partisan.
Back when Wisconsin had 10 congressional districts, I think I'm accurate in saying that 9 of them were competitive. We now have 8 and none are.
Right,
yeah. And I think that's, again, this is not about Republicans and Democrats, it's about citizens. It's about each and every one of us and the value of our vote. And when lines are drawn in a way that diminishes the value of a vote, then we're all affected. And it doesn't matter which political party does it, it's wrong. Some people said to me one time, said, you know, Dale, when the Democrats do that, it's bad. But it's okay when we do it. And I said, that's not what I told the people back home. I don't believe that. And I'm not going to do that. And I think that, you know, we need to rise above partisanship and promote the notion of patriotism. Because that's what this is really about. And I might be proud to be a Republican. He's certainly proud to be a Democrat. But we are both patriots before we are partisans.
Host.
5 minutes.
The host gets to ask a question.
Okay. When we talk about what we can do, anything that we do publicly can be educational. And so as you mentioned, going to town boards, there were people who went to the Lincoln County board
and had a resolution to create a nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional redistricting plans. And that was passed. And so as we're looking for things to do, whatever county we live in, whatever township, whatever city, I think getting out and presenting to those political bodies this information is educational and important, whether they say that it's political or not. I think it expands the grassroots understanding.
Just remember to have fun.
Yes.
And have in your back pocket, when they give you this, the Democrats are crying about this, just have Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maryland in your back pocket. Show it to them.
I have one.
Yeah, and then you.
I guess I'd like for you to do some cheerleading for us, because when you talk about the fact that these representatives really aren't listening anymore because they know they're gonna be reelected, people try to email them, call them, also try very hard to be civil. And my feeling is, I called Duffy's office the other day on the Trump Care bill, and the person I talked to was quite friendly. And I asked him, he was just I shouldn't say just, he was a staff person. And I said, are you getting a lot of calls? Oh yeah, we're getting a lot of calls. I said, how are they running? And he was honest. He said, the majority are saying, don't vote for it. Of course, he voted for it. You send an email and...
Guy still have his job?
Hmm?
That staffer still have his job?
I don't know who was listening, but, you know, and you kind of think, well, it just goes into the delete, and anytime you're not civil, it should go into the delete. You know, I don't have a problem with that, if you're not, but it really, you wonder if you're just wasting your time.
Very frustrating.
Every politician keeps score every day. They know. They know how many people came up to them in office hours. They know how many handwritten letters they've gotten. They know how many family, friends, or people with connections that are through some hobby or another came up to them. And they can measure the quality of the discourse. They're all capable of that. I saw this Congressman Labrador the other day lose it in front of a group of people. He was scared, severely threatened, I think he felt. He was scared. And
he said,
he said nobody dies for lack of health care. What he maybe was thinking, wanted to say is, you know, we have a Hill-Burton law that makes sure that hospitals take care of people. But of course, it sort of neatly ignores the fact that the pain and the suffering people go through before they get to the emergency room, and he ignores the fact that that is the worst place to deliver care and the most expensive place to deliver care. And that's not a comment in our hospitals. They do a great job. It's just not a system that makes sense. Let's see, right over here.
Moira Skupian from Antigo. One of the things that I think is important is you're being active too, is that when your representatives and assembly people and senators you get notice they're coming to your town for a town hall. I've gone to these and there's like 3 of us, 4 of us. Show up, ask the questions, show up. I mean, you're gonna end up writing the question. I'm not talking just Duffy, I'm talking when Tom Tiffany's gonna be at your library, you know, you have to get everyone out there to show up, and even if you don't ask a question, right? Just be present to the dialogue that you're going to hear, like we were tonight. And thank you very much for having this.
Let me give you a nasty little trick that I've watched some people do in southeastern Wisconsin. You know what? If you don't feel like anybody listens to you, if you're a Democrat and you're mad at a Republican, join in a primary fight. If you're on the other political party and the same things happen to you, and spoil your representative's summer. Make them go out and do something. Yeah, spend some money. You can do that. I mean, you got to be a little bit creative. But you know, I think showing up does matter, and I think for the most part, over the years I was in the legislature, the people who had the biggest influence on me were friends, people who I respected, I knew, who were good thinkers. And when they told me after the first time I voted for voter ID, they said, Dale, you blew it. You normally do a great job, you blew it on this. I went back the second time and it changed my vote. Not a big deal. You know, I'm human. I looked at it, I made it a little better, I felt an obligation to vote for it. But when I came back and people started showing up like that, it changed my mind. I'm not gonna apologize for that. Maybe the rest of those guys think they're perfect. And somehow, well, as far as I know, there's only one person who was perfect, and I certainly am not that person, and most of the people I served with certainly don't fit in that category. So just, you know, listen to people, make up your mind. But the way to be most persuasive really is to be thoughtful and intelligent and make good arguments and be respectful. Yeah, you've been very patient, and that'll be the last one, okay?
I'm Jim Leschke from Rhinelander, and I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for being here tonight. This has really been great.
We are.
And to thank you as well for your service in the legislature in the past. I know that Tim has taken a look at running for governor and has decided not to do that. I have heard a rumor just within the last few seconds, actually, that the two of you are going to run as a team for governor. So my question is, would you confirm that?
Well, that's very flattering and kind. Normally, what he says is, as soon as I'm out at the mailbox and get the first check for $1 million, I'll reconsider. But you know, I want to just tell you something. I had 32 years. That's a long time. If I had run for re-election, I would have been tied with my friend Senator Rob Coles for the longest serving member of the Wisconsin legislature. Only surpassed by our mutual friend Fred Risser, who is celebrating his 90th birthday, was not even opposed in his last election, and is the longest serving legislator in the history of the country. My wife and I wrote him a nice note the other day for his birthday party, which neither of us can attend. You know, I believe all you have to do is look at what happened in France. You had a complete newcomer who was thoughtful and intelligent, who managed to inspire people. Or look at Bernie Sanders. Everybody said, oh, somebody's 70 years old, they can't get elected. Well, baloney. You know, if people had played fair in the Democratic Party, my guess is he would have been the president. That's my belief as a Republican. But, you know, we don't have to go back to the same dynasty or the same person. And we were proud to do that, and yes, I never met a politician who didn't one day dream of being governor, especially when they were losing. And I certainly can attest to the fact that this guy has fantastic ideas. But as for myself, I won't speak for him, I'm anxious to participate. But I had a chance to run for higher office. I told you I was the silver medalist. I learned a lot, and Congressman Kine and I are friends. And he says nice things about me, I say nice things about him, and we disagree or we disagree, and we try to make our mutual association in my community work for the benefit of everybody. You know, a good politician never says never, but I'm pretty close to that.
I suggest we have to flip a coin, because, you know, who's going to run for governor, who's going to run for lieutenant governor. You have to have that deal. And then what would we run as? Dale's a lifelong Republican and tells me he wants to stay there. And I'm a lifelong Democrat, I'm staying there, so we could have probably run as independents.
Bipartisan.
But whatever. But
they're running as patriots.
Yeah, Patriot Party, yeah. It's not going to happen.
It's time for a new generation, I think. That's my firm belief.
You don't think I'm too old, do you?
Yeah, I would summarize by saying that we are all part of a number of very dynamic processes, political, familial, and otherwise, that momentum and timing are crucial. And I sense that we have momentum and that the time is ripening for certain good changes. And I also say, join groups.
Join groups. Take advantage of momentum and timing.
We do one more question.
Yes, we'll do one more.
Real quick question. Do you have a hashtag regarding the gerrymandering that we can use on social media?
Well, we do have fairelectionsproject.com. You go there, that's got all the information on this group that we're looking at. Fairelectionsproject.com.
Make a donation there too if you want to. Yes, absolutely. I believe that's possible.
And if anybody wants to buy a book, I'd be happy to sell it to you and sign it. So, and he might sign it too.
And we would echo the comments that we need to recruit good people to run for office from the next generation. So the League of Women Voters of the Northwoods is doing that, and by one important project of going to our area high schools with the goal of registering every high school student who will turn 18 before they graduate. So those are the sorts of things you can do. And somebody asked here about, again, about things you can do. We have copies of the Lincoln County Board resolution regarding redistricting. On the back there is the testimony that I gave there, which references the point that it's the first and 14th constitutional amendments that pertain in this situation. And the group to join is the League of Women Voters of the Northwoods.
There you go.
So take some time afterwards to personally thank and further question Tim Cullen and Dale Schultz if you like. Take a look at those books. Deb? And just thank you very much for coming up here.